Hi, Zizaran here with another video, and today we're going to cover, is PoE2 too slow? As you've seen, there's been loads of reveals at Exilecon, and some of the concerns from the community have been watching people play the gameplay demo, especially like Act 3 and Act 4, the further ones of the campaign, look a lot slower than current PoE1, so I figured we would talk about that a little bit because I do have some experience with it, and obviously I got to talk to the developers. So there are several factors here, and obviously there will be some speculation on my part because at the end of the day, we haven't seen or actually gotten to play any endgame here at all, right? It's only been campaign stuff. Now, I have talked to the developers and the demo is overtuned. This isn't even necessarily on purpose. It's just they haven't had time to like fully fine-tune how it is supposed to be, but when I asked how overtuned it was, they were like, a lot. So it is overtuned, and on top of that, we don't really have many links on our skills, so obviously, especially the in-game, right? You'll have things like spell echo, etc. Now, it feels like they're moving away from every single support giving damage. It seems to be more about utility. This will be quite enabling in terms of what you can do, and it will be more about function. So like, oh, I want this to chain, or I want this to spell echo, I want to use unleash, etc. It will be, obviously unleash is not a support in the normal sense anymore, but it'll be more things like that and less about, ooh, what gives me the most multipliers. It's more about, well, what does it give me? Like, what utility do I get? And that could be very interesting. We're also under-leveled, and the skill trees we don't know anything about because they might be completely unoptimized. Now, from what I understand, leveling did matter and that it was being auto-allocated. Maybe that means that we can actually, like, load or like import and export skill trees in PoE2. That would be huge, but we've obviously been waiting for that for a long time. For me, this feels like just wiping the slate clean, going back to like pretty old Path of Exile before ramping up the power creep again. I do think it'll be slower than what we're currently used to, but nowhere near as slow as it looks. You also saw that the density was crazy high in some areas, even higher, like way higher than our current campaign in a lot of areas. I was getting absolutely swarmed down. So I think with proper builds and stuff, because I tried Act 3 and Act 4, Act 3 was probably the worst balanced one. I was getting absolutely shredded, and the worst part was being stun locked so much, but it was still really fun. Act 2 was an absolute blast, perfectly done, and still really high density, so I think people will enjoy that part. I don't know, I think it makes me very happy that the game is being split, because if I don't love PoE2, at least we're going to get PoE1 with even more development work and stuff like that. So I think that'll be pretty great. Now, PoE2 is meant to be harder, but it should be harder in a different way, like how you approach it. Like things like movement is very different. Now, that being said, I was using Leap Slam the way I used Leap Slam in PoE1. I didn't see anyone else doing that in Act 4, but I was literally just jumping over everything, which a lot of people were saying, oh, you can't even use Leap Slam as a movement ability, but I was absolutely doing that because the biggest notable change for me was no phasing, right? Hopefully that's still something we have access to at the end game, but I had no phasing early game, so I kept getting stuck on monsters, and the roll didn't move me through monsters unless there was a gap. You also saw that a lot of abilities have like built-in movement into them. I'm not 100% sure how I feel about that. I think they can get janky really quickly. I don't know. It would be great if in the skill tree, like when you open the skill tree thing, if they have like an option, you know, where you're choosing what the swap works with, like if you're using it with your offhand or your main hand, they could also have like disable movement or not. Like for example, if I don't want the comet to move me backwards. Now there were some abilities, the Huntress one, I used that a lot. It actually saved me so much. So there are abilities where you will like it. Now, another really interesting thing is the introduction of iframes on the roll. Now, while you're rolling, you cannot get hit by like attacks and spells. You can only get hit by slams, right? So if you're getting hit by a big AoE move, that'll hit you. But any like direct like arrow or anything like that, you'll roll out of the way of. So that will add a whole new level of skill, I think. I do think 2DD gives pretty weak characters as well. We saw that we didn't really have any like crazy items. So I think even as your first character of the league, I would assume it'll be stronger than what we had. I say this because you saw several people get like an alked weapon, alked spear or something, and their damage went up like 6 times just from one weapon. So Another really interesting thing for player power is that we can now reliably crowd control bosses. Things like freeze and stun, etc. It becomes very similar to other games that have poise, where after a while you just get like a 10-second stun on the boss and you're just able to go ham. So that could be like very interesting to build into. Now, another thing that's really good as well, and I think will be most people's favorite, is the fact that sockets are gone on gear, so you no longer have to 6-link a new armor before, you know, yeah, this is an upgrade now. Or if you've ever like found something like, yeah, this is a slide upgrade, but I'm not going to 6-link it first, and then you just end up vendoring it. That's no longer the case. An upgrade is now an upgrade. And I think, I hope they've kept Val Orbs, I'm assuming so. But I think that means like Val Orbs are going to be so much more special, because it's going to be very interesting now. Now, I want to go back a little bit to the speed. So again, my first attempt was Act 3 with the Sorceress, and I only had 25 minutes. So normally you're supposed to have 45 minutes for the demo, but whatever the presentation was right before me, it dragged on a little bit. The Act 3 one is really, really hard as well. I did get to try Act 2 later. I'll talk about that in a sec. But yeah, Act 3 was incredibly hard. Very, very different to play. And first I tried using a lot of different moves. I definitely feel like a lot of people think, oh, you have to use like 6 different moves. You don't. Like, when I was playing later, I was just using 2 moves, much like PoE1. And that's something you don't need to panic that much about, I think. I think it'll give you a lot more choice, where some things will use a lot of skills, and like maybe things like cast on crit, or cast on damage taken if that's still in, and like minions have like a lot more options. But I think like 2-button builds or 1-button builds will still be very, very powerful as well. I think it's more likely that you'll have like a single turn move and a clearing move. I felt very bad to be permanently stunned. I hope they address that. Obviously, just the fact that our power and things will be tuned differently will probably help that too. If things are dealing less damage, you get stunned less. And if things have less health, you'll kill them before you reach, or before they reach you. So that'll make a very big difference, I think. But Act 3, honestly, it felt pretty bad. I was a little bit disheartened. Now, obviously, I did try to rush through it as well. That didn't help. If I had 45 minutes or an hour to like really take my time, go through it, gear up a little bit, it would be different. And obviously with tuning and stuff. But yeah, I was rushing through it. I really wanted to get to a boss. I didn't get to a boss in the time, because I died a few times and had to rerun a large amount. But let's talk a little bit about the Huntress. Huntress made me so happy. I really wish I'd chosen that for my stream playthrough. It was such a different world. It just felt like PoE. It was very like refreshing to me, especially after getting pummeled by Act 3. And yeah, that's where I just used 2 moves. I used like a lightning attack. It was basically lightning strike, but with a javelin. And then I used like a jabby move for my single target, and it felt very snappy, very good. I had like this like hurricane thing I would put down that would stack. That was really good for single targets. So really enjoyed it, and it was crazy density, and it just felt really good. I even got an upgrade. I did get the full 45 minutes, and I finished the entire thing. I actually like, yeah, I did finish killing like some sort of behemoth? No, mastodon? I think it was called the mastodon. Some sort of dual boss, and I managed to kill it. So I was quite happy with that, especially after having a rough time with the Act 3 thing. The most concerning thing for me, and what we're going to talk about next, is progression. And this is things like crafting, etc. And I'm very scared about this, because they've done some things like the Chaos Orb now has like remove and add, similar to Ashlyn. It doesn't like reroll the entire item anymore. I believe Scouring was gone, they said. I can't remember exactly, but, and I don't know what's like fully finalized, but they're looking at doing a lot to the crafting system. That would be the #1 thing that would decide if like PoE2 is for me or not. Now, obviously, I'm going to play it, and quite a lot. And worst case scenario would be something like D4 that I play for like a week or 2, right? And then keep going back to PoE1, because I love PoE1, right? And it's very easy to say that because it's familiar and I know that I like it. And PoE2 is new, so it's scary, so I don't know if I'm going to like it yet. But something that would make that decision for me is if crafting was gone. That is something I'm concerned about, but I also sort of doubt it. They know what an integral part of PoE crafting is, so I just assume that there'll be like whole new ways of crafting, and that they're trying to avoid making past mistakes. I believe somebody mentioned something with like they don't want you to downgrade an item anymore. Like you should always build on an item. There's some sort of philosophy like that, and I can get behind that. So I think scouring was gone as well. Alchemy is the same as before. Now that I can see the appeal of, like bases being more valuable and stuff. I actually quite like that. I know like that probably sounds grim for softcore players. It's obviously very different, but as a hardcore player, that's kind of cool to me anyway. Vendors are also supposed to sell better items, and you'll probably buy more things from vendors. We'll talk about gold in a sec. I just really hope they nail crafting. It's such an important part of PoE for me. So many of my favorite moments ever was crafting, and like PoE2 really needs to nail that too, and have that be a special part. Now, obviously, I think a lot would like agree that it is there's like problems with crafting in PoE at the moment, and maybe even currency. Like there's some leagues where I have literally like 3 or 4 thousand chaos and like not like it's not like unobtainable or crazy, and there's there's maybe a bit too much of some things. So it can definitely be improved on, but I don't want it to be like removed either. So it's a really tough one. It's definitely what I'm the most concerned about. We have a Norwegian saying, which is like, don't experience your sorrows before they happen. But it's definitely something I want to talk about. Hopefully, get some podcasts with TGD in the future and be able to get some feedback before things are too locked in. Because crafting is such an important thing to me, and I wanna make sure that it has like a really big place in PoE too. Because when for like the longest years, and I probably would still say this, whenever someone asks like, "What's your favorite part of PoE?" I would say the crafting system, the fact that it has currency, the fact that it doesn't have gold. Like I love the whole like transmutes, alterations, scourings, everything. I love it. Um, it is very anti new player. I will agree to that. It's very anti new player. It's like, okay, welcome to Path of Exile. We have a periodic table of currency. It's one of the posters they were selling at Exilecon. Gems will now be drop only as well, which is a bit of a Ruthless thing, which obviously I've mentioned concerns of in the past. I don't want Ruthless to affect the game that much because it's not a game mode that I have particularly liked. Uncut gems will also drop, so you basically right click any gem you want when you get one. So I think that could work and be pretty cool. It also seems like just an early game thing that's a problem. So it'll be like an extra part of excitement, like day one, day two kind of thing, and it won't be something you're going to care about on day five. So that's fine because I quite like things that are adding excitement early. That's part of why I love these games anyway, like the resets being so exciting. Now, there are a lot of changes to Flasks. We don't really understand or know yet if we're getting utility Flasks. But Flasks also no longer refill with all monster kills. That's something I was quite vocal about at Exilecon. I was like, I don't care if it like insta refreshes all your flasks, but white monsters killing them should absolutely give currency flask charges. It's crazy that they don't. So it was just magic and rare monsters. Rare giving like quite substantial uniques, I think, filling up completely. But yeah, no, it's weird. And fast charges during boss fights as well felt quite bad because they didn't like the ads didn't give charges there either. So fast felt awful. It felt way worse in PoE2 than in PoE1. So I hope that gets addressed. But yeah, they also no longer refill when you go to town. You gotta press like the well in town. I don't really feel the need for that. I don't understand. They've said it several times. They're like, oh, if we got to do it again, we will have it refill when you click a vendor or click a well. And I'm like, but why? What does that add? Like, what do you achieve by that? I feel like nobody really asked that when it got brought up last Exicon. I feel like it, honestly, I might just DM Chris and be like, why? What does that achieve? How does that help me? Quicksilver flasks are gone. My editor wrote, huge, this is awesome. Fuck Quicksilver flasks. But he also loves Final Fantasy, so he's not right about games a lot. Sorry, I just like to bully my editor. I hate it. I love utility flasks. I love like setting up. Honestly, I think flasks are in a really good spot right now. With the combination of the new tools they've given us with like enkindling orbs, instilling orbs, I think flasks are in a great spot right now. For people that want to automate them, you can. They're very easy to automate right now. You can invest in them so that you can have them a little bit on bosses, and a lot of us just end up using maybe like say you're doing X-Arc, you're using 1 or 2 Ruby flasks and maybe 3 life flasks. Sometimes people use like 4 life flasks and like spam them. So I quite like Flasks right now. Um, Now, I do get that obviously a lot of people don't like when everything is like something used in every build, but you can get around that by having movement abilities be competitive with movement, right? Like back in the day, we would have so much Leap Slam focus that we wouldn't have Quicksilvers. And yeah, the number one thing I'd be worried about would be Quartz Flask going. Like phasing is so important. I love phasing. Makes the game feel better. Next up, we have gold, and gold is a bit of a weird one, and we don't really fully understand what's completely fine or not. I feel like I've heard multiple developers say different things here, so I think this is something that's still being like worked on and thought out. But from what I gather, gold wasn't supposed to be like a super endgame thing, and it's mostly going to be for trading with vendors. And if that is what it's for, like I would be very sad if it starts replacing our other currencies and starts actually mattering. But if all it's for is particularly to target new players to make it easier to buy bases while leveling and going through the campaign, then I think it's the best possible thing for gold ever. Like something that becomes irrelevant at the end game and honestly maybe even stops dropping after the campaign, but it's like literally just to make it less confusing. Like right now, new players might be the man. I don't have a blacksmith's whetstone, or I don't have armor scrap. I don't have 3 transmutes. I don't have an alchemy to buy these things. And having gold replace that, honestly, so good for accessibility. And that sounds really good to me as somebody that deals particularly with new players coming into the game. So that I can definitely get behind as somebody that's super anti-gold. But hopefully that's what it ends up being. I still want to see things like vendor recipes. I still want. It's gonna be kind of weird if like identified items don't give alterations anymore. Maybe they start selling for orbs and stuff later in the maps and stuff. I would hope so. Or maybe it's drop only on everything now. And currency is such a like unique system to PoE. It's one of my favorite things about it. And they always said like they didn't like gold, and that's changed now. So yeah, there are ups and downs, but I think I would prefer if there was no gold. Like I'm a big fan of like currency shards and stuff like that. And especially as this is something that's gonna add more currency clutter if it appears at the end game because they only stack to 5,000 and they take up inventory space. And another thing that we can talk about at the end, they've added Deckard Cain to Path of Exile. Diablo 3 didn't want him. Path of Exile was like, you know what, you can come here. We now have Identify All in Path of Exile, something people have wanted for a long time. Honestly, I would much rather, like to have seen that everything is identified. Especially if things only sell for gold anyway. Um, I think identifying gear is an outdated mechanic in ARPGs. I think the only way that identification of items makes sense is more in like CRPGs, like Baldur's Gate, Neverwinter Nights. It either needs to be a resource, like you can't identify every item, or at least at all times you don't have like the resource to identify all items, or you can wear unidentified items and there can be downsides. There can be cursed items. I remember in Baldur's Gate 2, I put on an item to see if I could like see what it did, and it locked to my character and had a big downside. And I was like, wow, that's really cool. I wish I'd identified that first and saw that it was cursed. Um, I think that's the only thing that makes identifying items make sense. So, in my opinion, they shouldn't be in RPGs. I initially recoiled at the idea of a split game at a PoE1 and PoE2, and then I slowly came around. First, I was like, well, this will be good for me professionally, right? There will be more RPG competition. They just made their own competition, so I will do better, right? I'll have more stuff to make content from. But then I was like, what if I don't like PoE2 and that was the only thing I had? That would be devastating. And I was told, I've heard mixed reports of there being like 5 or 10 developers working on PoE1 the last year and a half. And that made me really happy. Because if they can do things as good as Sentinel with Recombinators and Sanctum with that few people, and there, from what I understood, there was going to be more developers moving like to equalize the split. Probably not 50-50, I wouldn't assume, but there will be more than what was working currently. Then this is just an all-around amazing thing because some of my favorite leagues, but 2 of my top 3 favorite leagues were in the last year and a half. My top 3 is Sanctum, Sentinel, and then Synthesis. It was that far. Like until Sentinel, I hadn't had a favorite league for years. So I think that's really good. And honestly, it was just really great to be at Exilecon and see all the passion. And obviously, I've been very anti-Ruthless. I saw a lot of people saying PoE2 is very Ruthless. It's a very different vibe. Um, it is more like Ruthless than the current game, so definitely a concern of mine. But I was dropping more stuff, especially Act 2. So we'll see. It's a tough one. It's a tough one. I'm still very excited. I think this is the best possible solution because if I hate PoE2, like I said, then at least we'll have PoE1. Just wanted to make a video for you guys and talk about it. Been having a blast at ExileCon. Be home in 3, 4 days? 4? Maybe 5. Either way, thank you so much for watching. It was a pleasure seeing all of you that showed up at ExileCon. Thanks for watching. Sub if you liked the video, but more importantly, try to die less than I do.